Before you judge me, just remember, the footage only shows what I allowed it to show. And whatever you think you saw that Halloween night, none of it was supposed to be real. I know you've seen the video, but what you don't understand is this. The footage didn't lonely, I did. And if I sound nervous right now, it's because I still can't tell whether I'm explaining what happened at Halloween, or hiding it all over again. Most people think the clip started as a prank. It did, or at least, that's the version I keep telling myself. I mean, why else would I have been wandering into that abandoned house with a camera I could barely hold straight? Why else would Raffi be behind me, whispering like he was scared of waking something up? We planned it, we rehearsed it, we even laughed about how fake it would look. But the thing everyone keeps asking me the question, I still avoid, is why. I kept recording on a say I don't have a real answer. Or maybe I do, and I just don't want to say it out loud. The place looked worse than I remembered. A sagging porch, windows punched out like missing teeth, and the door scratched so badly it felt like something tried to claw its way out. I told the audience earlier that I'd never been inside before, but that's not entirely true. I recognized things, little things. The rusted wind chimes, the cracked front tiles, the smell of damp wood that hit as soon as the door drifted open. But I brushed it off because I didn't want anyone wondering why a harmless prank felt uncomfortably familiar. Inside, the air was colder than outside, colder than it should have been. Our camera lights bounced against peeling wallpaper, scattered debris, and long, narrow hallways that seemed to bend just slightly in the wrong direction. Raffi kept cracking jokes to cover how tense he was. Bro, this is gonna be viral. He whispered behind me, nudging my shoulder. If we hear one fake ghost moan, people are gonna lose it. I remember forcing a laugh. Yeah, fake, right? He didn't notice how my voice shook. Or maybe he did and ignored it. Raffi always tried to act brave, even when he wasn't. But that night, something in his eyes flickered. Whenever I turned the camera toward him, he wanted to back out, but couldn't figure out how to say it. We moved deeper, stepping over broken floorboards and shattered glass. Every sound echoed, our footsteps, distant dripping water, and something soft brushing against the walls. I blamed it on rats. I didn't want Raffi thinking I was scared. I didn't want the audience to think that either. But I could feel something in the house. A heaviness pressing down on us, almost like we were being watched. I told everyone in my original upload that we were just 3 idiots messing around, but that's not exactly right. There was supposed to be 3 of us. I keep saying that, like it's nothing, but the truth is, I never expected her to show up. I barely knew her. That's what I've said for weeks. Barely knew the victim, but whenever I talk about her I slip. I mention things I shouldn't know. Her favorite hoodie color, the way she tied her hair, how she always hummed when she was scared. Details I shouldn't remember, not if she was just some extra in our prank video. The camera shake got worse. As we headed toward the living room, Raffi tapped my arm, making me jump. Chill, man, he muttered. It's just a video. I swallowed hard. Yeah, but doesn't it feel like the house is breathing? He frowned. Don't start that creepy stuff. But I wasn't trying to be creepy. I genuinely felt the floor vibrate under my shoes. A subtle shift. A low thrum. I still don't know if it was real or if my mind was already breaking that early into the night. The living room had a collapsed ceiling, tangled wires, and a dark stain on the far wall. I didn't mention that stain in the original video because I knew people would pause, zoom in, make theories, and I didn't want theories not about blood. Especially not then. We filmed ourselves pretending to hear footsteps, fake laughter, forced jumpscares. It should have been harmless. But when Raffi wandered out of frame to check the hallway, I kept recording in his direction, even though I didn't know why. The camera angle dipped, catching a glimpse of something, a shape near the doorway. But at first I thought it was just a trick of the shadows, a coat hanging, a beam of broken light, something ordinary. But as the camera steadied, the shape shifted. It elongated, leaning inward, almost as if it was studying us. I swear it looked like someone standing just beyond the threshold, head tilted sideways, motionless, watching. When I reviewed the footage later, the figure was clear to clear. But in the moment, I didn't see anything. I didn't react. People ask me why I didn't scream or call out, why I didn't warn Raffi. I don't have a good answer. I keep telling myself I simply didn't notice, that I was too focused on the shot. But deep down, I wonder if a part of me recognized the shape, and that's why I ignored it. Raffi came back, brushing dust off his hoodie. Basement next, he asked. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Yeah, basement. I didn't tell him I felt sick. I didn't tell him the camera suddenly felt hotter in my hands, like it didn't want me to let go. Instead, I turned toward the hallway again, forcing a smile that didn't feel like mine. And then it happened. As we moved toward the basement door, the camera briefly panned back toward the living room and the shadowy figure was gone. Not faded, not blurred out. Gone, like it had slipped away while we weren't looking. I should have stopped recording right then. I should have turned around, grabbed Raffi, and left the house. But I didn't. I told myself it was nothing. A glitch, a trick, off the light. But if it was nothing, then why does the figure appear again, clearer, when the basement footage begins? That's where the real story starts. And that's where everything begins to fall apart. If the first part of the footage felt staged, everything that happened once we reached the basement door was the opposite. And before you ask Geese, I remember what I said earlier, that I wasn't paying attention, that I didn't notice the figure behind us in the living room. But the moment my hand touched that basement handle, something inside me froze, like it recognized what was waiting below. Maybe I had seen the figure, maybe I just didn't want to believe it. The basement door groaned open with the kind of sound that sticks to your ribs. Cold air rushed upward, brushing against my face as if something down there exhaled. My camera light flickered twice, then steadied, casting a weak cone into the darkness. Raffi leaned over my shoulder, trying to look braver than he felt. "Bruh, you sure we should go down?" he asked quietly. I forced a grin. "It's a prank video, remember? We need reactions. Nothing scary happens upstairs." He nudged me with his elbow. "Yeah, but this feels different. Different. That was one word for it." From where we stood, I could only see the first few steps. The rest of the staircase disappeared into a thick darkness that seemed heavier than the house above it. I didn't mention this in the original upload, but the darkness wasn't normal. It almost looked like it was moving, like something shifting just beyond the edge of the light. I swallowed the fear creeping up my throat. "We're wasting time. Let's just get one take," Raffi sighed. "Fine, but if something jumps out, I'm hitting you first." We both laughed, but only one of us meant it. I took the first step. It creaked loudly, echoing through the basement like a warning. My camera shook, and I steadied it with both hands. The deeper we went, the colder it became, as if the house was trying to push us back upstairs. When we reached the bottom, the floor was covered in dust except for a strange trail along an even path where the dust had been disturbed, like someone crawled across it recently, probably animals. I muttered before Raffi could overthink it, but even I didn't believe that. The smell hit us next, damp, moldy, and faintly metallic. My heart pounded against my ribs. I told myself it was just old pipes, old wires, old everything. But I'd smelled something like that before, and once again, I refused to think about where. "Do you hear that?" Raffi whispered suddenly. We froze. At first I thought it was my imagination. Then, faintly, a soft humming, a woman's humming, familiar, too familiar. Raffi grabbed my arm. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know." I lied. Of course I knew. I just didn't want to say her name. "Not yet." We followed, the humming deeper into the basement. The walls tightened around us, narrowing like a throat. Pipes dripped water that echoed like distant footsteps. My camera flickered again. When the light returned, something on the far wall caught Raffi's attention. "Yo, shine it over there," he whispered. I lifted the camera. In the center of the concrete wall, a single handprint smeared down the surface. Dark old, or at least I wanted to believe it was old. Raffi stepped closer. "Bro, this is real blood. Tell me this is part of the prank." I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, a scream ripped through the basement. Not a fake scream, not an acted one. A raw, breathless, desperate scream. I don't, my voice caught. My throat tightened. Something in that scream hit me like a memory slamming back into place. Without thinking, I moved toward the sound. My camera pointed ahead, its shaky beams slicing through the darkness. The humming had stopped. The scream had stopped. But the silence that followed was somehow worse. We turned the corner, and there she was, Hania. But I didn't say her name. Not then, not in the video, not in the report. She was standing near the back wall, a flashlight in her hand, breathing hard like she'd just run a marathon. Her eyes were wide, terrified, darting around the room as if expecting something to lunge out of the shadows. Dust clung to her clothes. Her hair was tangled, her hands were shaking. I felt my stomach drop. I tried to mask the way my heart lurched. Raffi hissed. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to meet us outside." She shook her head frantically. You don't understand, I heard something down here. I thought it was you guys. And then something moved behind me. She stopped, staring at the camera. You recording? Yeah, I said weakly. We thought you bailed. Her voice cracked. I should have. Before we could say anything else, something thudded. In the darkness behind her, she spun around, flashlight shaking wildly. There. Did you hear that? She cried. Raffi stumbled backward. Man, this isn't funny anymore. I know, I said, though the words came out hollow. I panned the camera toward the sound. The screen flickered against static for half a second. When the picture cleared, something appeared at the very edge of the frame. A shadow dot, tall dot, still dot, watching dot. I felt my pulse smash against my ribs. I blinked hard, trying to make sense of it. But when I looked up from the camera, nothing was there. Hania grabbed my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. We need to leave now. Raffi nodded violently. Yeah, forget the prank. Forget the video we're done. But before I could agree, before I could even breathe, the lights on our devices flickered once more. Then the basement plunged into complete darkness. Hania screamed again. And this time, it sounded like she wasn't screaming at something. But because it finally touched her, the footage cuts right there. The next part, what happened when the lights came back, is what people still argue about online. And it's what the police kept asking me to explain. But the thing is, I'm still not sure I want to remember it. The basement footage ends abruptly, but what happened after? I've been telling myself different versions ever since. And that's the problem. Even I don't know which one is true. Some nights I replay it in my head, thinking I remember everything perfectly, and some nights I convince myself it was all a hallucination, a prank gone too far. Either way, the audience only ever saw what I chose to show, and what I didn't show. Well, that's the part that ruined everything. When the lights finally returned, the basement was empty. Hania was gone. Raffi was staring at me like he wanted to hit me and hug me at the same time. His face was pale, his lips trembled. Where is she? He whispered. I told him the only thing I could think of. I don't know. But I did know. Or at least, I thought I did. I panicked, flipping the camera toward the stairs, toward the shadows, toward anything that would explain why she disappeared. There was no movement, no sound. Only the echo of dripping water and our own ragged breathing. The basement felt wrong, like it had shifted while we weren't looking. I told the audience later that I grabbed Raffi and ran, that we ran upstairs, burst out of the house and called the police immediately. That's partly true, but I left out the part where I turned back, just for a second. I thought I saw Hania standing at the edge of the basement stairs. She didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. I blinked, and she was gone. I've always wondered if I imagined it, or if she really was there. The camera caught something, a flicker, a shadow, a shape that didn't belong. I edited it out. I couldn't leave that in. People would have called me insane. Maybe I am. The police arrived later that night. I told them our story. Prank, abandoned house, friend missing. Hania was missing, not dead. That was the line I stuck to. I didn't mention the figure, or the scream, or how the basement seemed alive. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Or rather, I refused to answer honestly. I made it clear if she left, it wasn't my fault. If she was hurt, I didn't do it. Raffi gave his statement. It matched mine mostly. Except he saw things I didn't, or maybe I didn't want to see. He claimed he saw someone moving in the shadows, moving fast, almost too fast to be human. He said nothing. He didn't ask who. Over the next few days, the story blew up online. People called it a viral prank gone wrong. Conspiracy theories, ghost hunters, fake screams. I posted carefully edited clips, showing just enough chaos to keep viewers hooked, but never the basement footage that really mattered. Some of the comments worried me more than the police. The camera captured something behind you, one wrote. Did you see her eyes? She's terrified. Another, the shadow at 2:30 and 2 clear to be fake, and they were right, but they didn't know the half of it. Weeks passed. Raffi stopped talking to me. I could tell he suspected something, even though he never said it outright. He probably knew I was hiding more than just editing choices. Maybe he knew I was lying about her disappearance. Maybe he suspected I had done something I couldn't admit even to myself. I started sleeping with the lights on, reviewing every clip, every frame, trying to convince myself it wasn't my fault. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I swore I heard her humming again, faint, almost behind me, or maybe inside me. And that sound, the one she made when she was scared, stayed with me. The camera had captured it, and I replayed it obsessively, searching for answers I knew I wouldn't find. The truth is, what people believe happened and what actually happened are different. Everyone thinks the killer is someone else, someone external, someone sinister, unknown. The police even hinted it could have been Raffia, even Hania herself, if she panicked and fell. But I know the truth, even if I don't fully understand. I saw her or him or it, and I kept recording. Months later I tried to return to the house, not to investigate, not to find proof, just to stare at it and tell myself I hadn't caused it. The door sagged the same way, windows empty, walls silent. Book inside. I felt it's the same heaviness, the same pressure, like the house remembered, like it was waiting. I keep the camera with me now. I film small things, empty streets, dark corners, abandoned buildings, and sometimes I see it. Shadows flickering just beyond the lens. Sometimes I hear that faint hum, almost inaudible, and I wonder if it's watching or if I'm watching myself. I've told myself I'm done confessing. I've told myself the footage is the only proof, the only evidence. But there's something worse than evidence. Something no one can see. The knowledge that even if the world forgets, even if the police close the case, the truth doesn't leave. Me, the figure, the scream, Hania's ease, they haunt me, and the final piece. The piece I've never admitted publicly. The real killer isn't gone. Maybe it never left. Maybe it's still there, waiting, watching. Maybe it's me, when the camera went dark in the basement. I swore I'd never return. But here I am, telling you this, confessing, editing, hiding, showing just enough. The story isn't over. It never will be. Because the person or thing that started this nightmare that Halloween night, it's still out there, and it knows you're watching. And maybe it's waiting for you. It's waiting for you. Story number 4, I should tell you the truth. But if I do, you'll think I'm the one who buried them. And maybe you're right, because every Halloween, when the church bells stop ringing, I still hear someone whisper my name from under the soil. I know you're expecting me to start with the truth. But the truth is the part I barely remember. Well, maybe I remember it too clearly. That's the problem. Every version I tell feels like a lie, even the one I'm about to tell you. Right now. Anyway, the night it happened, the night everything in that churchyard went wrong, I wasn't supposed to be alone. At least, that's what I keep telling myself when I wake up sweating at 3 a.m. But if you ask the investigators, they'll insist there was no one with me. No footprints but mine. No voice but mine. No shadow but mine. They're wrong. I know what I heard. I know who I followed there. Or I think I do. It started sometime after sunset Halloween. The air tasted metallic and the fog rolled in thick enough to make the bare trees look like they were leaning toward me, listening. I'd driven back to the abandoned churchyard to film some stupid Halloween footage for my channel at least. That's the version I told the police. And the version I've repeated so many times. It almost sounds believable. OMS. But the real reason I went was her. Or maybe she came after me. I can't straighten out that part. I only remember her voice behind me as I climbed the hill toward the broken bell tower. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. It was the first time she spoke that night. Or the last. My memory keeps switching the order. Like someone shuffled the scenes when I wasn't looking. The leaves were wet and soft beneath my feet, the ground sinking slightly with each step. I kept telling myself the place always smelled like damp earth and rust. It always had. It wasn't because something had been buried recently. That's what I told myself, and I think I believed it back then. The churchyard's gates were half fallen, iron bent, chains broken, long ago. The bell tower loomed above the trees, its roof caving inward, its wooden steps jagged as broken teeth. They say that church bells stopped ringing 20 years ago, after the fire, but that's a lie. I've heard them that night. Even though the investigators claimed nothing metal remained that could ring. Even though they said the wind couldn't have made that sound. Even though they stared at me like I was making everything up. I wasn't, I think. I kept filming as I moved deeper between the rows of crooked gravestones. But when I look at the footage now, everything shakes. The camera keeps slipping toward the ground, as if something was pulling it downward. I can hear my footsteps, but not hers. Maybe she wasn't really behind me. Maybe I imagined her voice. Except, I remember answering her. I swear I did. I just need a few shots. 5 minutes. Then we go home. I said, "With that has to mean something." Fog clung to my clothes as I approached the older section of the graveyard. That's when I saw the soil dark loose, freshly disturbed. Someone had dug there recently, Maybe earlier that night. Maybe earlier that hour. There was no shovel left behind. No tools. No signs of who had done it. The dirt looked like it was breathing. Or maybe that was my imagination again. I should have left. I know that anyone sane would have left. But she stepped closer. I heard her. Her breath touched the back of my neck. "Don't open it," she whispered. I wasn't opening anything. Not then. But someone had. Someone had dug halfway down and stopped. I could see part of what was inside cloth, frayed and blackened by dirt. I don't know if it was a coat or a sheet, or skin. I didn't touch it. I swear I didn't. At least, not then. The code crept deeper into my hands. I could barely hold the camera steady. The wind pushed the fog around us in slow columns, as if the graveyard was breathing out. And then, from the tower above, something groaned. Not quite a bell, not quite a voice, something in between. "We should go back," she whispered. "In a minute," I whispered back. But when I turned around, she wasn't there. The investigators say she never was. They say I made her up because guilt does that to people. But how do they explain the second set of whispers on the recording? How do they explain the way I kept talking to her as I backed away from the half-dug grave? They lost that audio file. Convenient, right? I kept filming, shaking, scanning the graves, calling her name, the name the investigators claim I never said, because they never wrote it in the report. But I did say it. I remember the way it cracked from my throat. "Where are you?" my voice echoed far too loudly in the silent yard. My breath fogged the air. The ground smelled wrong, like turned to earth, and something sweeter, something rotten beneath the sweetness. And then I heard it, a whisper, not hers, not mine, not human, not human. It whispered my name. Right from the half-open grave, I froze. My mouth went dry. My heartbeat thudded in my throat. The fog around me seemed to thicken, curling low around the disturbed soil. I stepped closer, even though every instinct screamed to run. Leaves stuck to my shoes. Dirt clung to my fingers. Something inside the grave shifted, softly, slowly, like something waking up. I leaned in, just close enough to see the shape beneath the cloth shift again when the whisper came a second time. "Come closer." I stumbled back so hard I nearly dropped the camera. I don't remember running. I don't remember reaching the gate. I only remember the bell tower above Masala, utterly silent. The bells didn't ring that night. Not for the police. Not for the victims. Not for me. But something else did. Something buried. Something waiting, and whatever it was, it whispered again as I fled the churchyard, calling me by the name only she ever used. You'd think after what I saw I heard I would have gone straight home, locked the doors, and never gone back. But that's not what I did. That's not who I was. Back then, I still believed the story wasn't over. Or maybe I didn't want it to be over. Maybe I needed some part of it to stay unfinished so I didn't have to face the part everyone keeps accusing me of. But none of this started with the grave. It started with Lena, and I didn't want to talk about her, not to the police, not to my family, not even to myself. But you're watching this now, and I guess I owe someone the truth, or at least the version of it I can still remember. After I ran from the churchyard that night, I got into my car and sat there trembling, my hands locked around the steering wheel. I kept thinking she, the other girl, would appear again at my window, but she didn't. She was gone, just like she vanished the night everything first started unraveling. I reached for my phone, planning to text the only person who ever understood this kind of fear. The message box was empty, waiting for me to type a name: Lena.
Yeah.
I know I said in chapter 1 that I didn't remember if she was with me or not, but that's not exactly true. I remember her more clearly than myself sometimes. I just don't remember the order of things, what happened first, who followed who whispered what. When you're scared enough, your memories start bending around the parts you don't want to see. Lena was supposed to come with me to the churchyard she always filmed. She again meant we'd been there before, but I only remember one night, or I think I do. The churchyard around us in the footage looked wrong. The gravestones tilted differently. The fog was heavier than I recalled. The tree near the gate had no leaves, though I swear it was full when I ran out afterward. It felt like the place changed every time I returned to it in my thoughts. At around the 5-minute mark, the footage glitched sharp, metallic screeching, and Lena gasped. The camera jerked violently toward the half-dug grave. She whispered, something I still can't fully decipher, though I've listened to it 100 times. It sounded like, "She's not supposed to be here." Then her voice dropped into something almost primal. Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't. The screen cut to black. That was it. The rest was missing. When the investigators asked for the footage, I handed over the SD card. They never returned it. They said there was nothing on it. Blank, they claimed. No files recorded. They said maybe the camera malfunctioned, but if it malfunctioned, why do I still hear their voices on my laptop at night? Why does the file sometimes appear on my desktop even after I delete it? My memory of Lena at the churchyard is slippery, shimmering, like something seen through fog or water. Sometimes she's right beside me. Sometimes I swear she's ahead of me. Sometimes she's the one calling my name. And once I dreamed she was the one buried in that half-open grave. But that doesn't make sense. It can't. I saw her leave. I think I did. Or maybe I only wanted to see her leave. The last thing I know for certain is this. Lena hasn't answered a message from me since that night. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. Her apartment is empty. Her family thinks she's traveling. The investigators think she's hiding. And I think she never made it out of that graveyard, because last night, when I couldn't sleep, I heard that whisper again. Not from my window. Not from my hallway. From beneath the floorboards. It said my name. But this time, it used Lena's voice. I didn't go back to the churchyard because I was brave. I went back because I couldn't breathe anywhere else. Not at home, not in the car, not in the mirror, where my own reflection kept flickering like it was a borrowed face. When the whisper came from beneath my floorboards using Lena's voice, something inside me snapped upright, like a corpse rising my autopsy. I told myself I needed closure, the kind of closure investigators pretend exists, so I drove back. The road felt different, narrower, twisting in ways I didn't remember. The trees leaned closer, their branches shaking like hands reaching for me. By the time I reached the rusted gate, the fog had thickened enough that I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me, and yet I knew exactly where the grave was, like something was guiding me, or pulling me. The soil was still disturbed, ridged with the same claw-like marks I remembered or imagined from before. My breath came out in small, trembling bursts that seemed too loud in the suffocating quiet. Of course I had my camera with me. Habit or compulsion, I don't know anymore. I clicked it on, though part of me wondered if it would even record. The last time the footage warped itself into nightmares even I couldn't explain. The ground beneath my shoes was soft, too soft, like something underneath was shifting. I crouched near the grave, hands shaking as I brushed away some of the loose dirt. The cloth beneath looked darker, no damp, heavy. I hesitated. I swear I didn't want to pull it, but my fingers kept moving, like they weren't mine anymore. That's when I heard her, "You came back," Lena's voice. But not Lena. I whipped around, camera trembling in my grip, searching the fog for a silhouette, a shadow, anything. Nothing moved except the fog curling around the gravestones like pale fingers. "Lena," I whispered. My voice cracked in a way I hated. "If you're here, just tell me where you are, please." Silence. Then a faint, dragging sound behind me. I turned slowly. The grave had sunk deeper. The cloth shifted again. No wind. No animal. No logical explanation. Just movement. This wasn't supposed to happen, I whispered to myself. No one was supposed to be here that night. No one but me. The second I said it, I realized how wrong it sounded, because I remembered her, the other girl. The one whose face I never describe because describing it makes it too real. The one Lena hated. The one who was there again. A memory clamped itself around my throat. Lena screaming at me near the bell tower, her voice raw, her hand shaking. "She made you choose." Choose what? Between us. I had told the investigators we never argued. But now I remembered the way Lena grabbed my shirt, begging me to leave with her. I remembered the way the other girl appeared behind the graves, silent and watching. And I remembered something else, something I'd been refusing to look at. Directly, Lena wasn't the one who followed me. I followed her. She had gone into the graveyard first, searching, looking for something buried long before that night. Something I had hidden from her, or hidden from myself. My head felt like it was splitting open. I stepped back from the grave, breathing too fast. "What did I bury?" I whispered. I didn't expect an answer, but I got one. A whisper rose from the soil, heavy, soaked in dirt. "You know," my heart jerked violently. Then another whisper layered over it, Lena's voice, this time trembling, terrified. "Don't let her out." Her not, Lena the other one. I stumbled backward, tripping against a root and falling hard. The camera clattered beside me, its lens tilted toward the grave, still recording. The ground throbbed under the disturbed soil, like something was pressing upward. straining against the weight of earth. I scrambled to my feet. Lena, where are you? My voice rose higher, more desperate. Just talk to me, tell me what happened to you. Another whisper drifted through the fog, but it wasn't from the grave this time. It came from behind me, faint and close to my ear. You buried me. I spun so fast I nearly fell again. No one, nothing but fog. But I remembered something I didn't want to remember. Lena's hands grasping my wrist. Her face pale in the moonlight. The grave already open. Her saying, this wasn't me. It was her. And the other girl standing completely still, smiling, not breathing, not alive. The memory twisted, blurred. Maybe I remembered it wrong. Maybe none of it happened. Or maybe this was the moment the investigators were waiting for. The moment I finally admitted something they always suspected. That someone died that night. That someone ended up in that grave. And that I was the only one who walked out with a pulse. But which girl was it, Lena? Or the other one? My thoughts spiraled violently, loud enough to drown out the whisper. The fog around me thickened until everything looked underwater. And then, the ground split. The soil cracked open, collapsing inward. The cloth tore in one slow, awful stretch of sound. Something inside, something pale pushed upward through the dirt. A hand, human, or close enough. I froze. Another whisper slipped out from beneath the earth. This time unmistakably Lena's voice. Weak, gasping. Help me. I stepped forward, instinct warring with terror. If Lena was actually down there, if she'd been trapped, buried alive, then everything I thought I remembered was wrong. Everything the investigators accused me of might have been right. But before I could touch her hand, before I could pull the cloth aside, second voice rose behind hers, cold, familiar, smiling. She's lying. The fog surged around me like a living thing. The grave lurched. The hand twitched. The cloth pulsed. I stumbled back, gasping as the bell tower above me groaned deep, metallic. Impossible. The bells never rang for the investigators. Never rang for the victims. Never rang for Lena. But now they rang for me. 4 slow, heavy tolls, each one vibrating through my bones. The voice beneath the soil spoke one last time. Come closer and see who you really buried. And I realized I didn't know the answer, and maybe I never will. Maybe I never will. I smiled nervously, probably the wind, but I knew it wasn't. The night ended with Evelyn gone, Detective Harris suspicious but powerless, and me, alone in a room full of bodies and whispers. I didn't sleep, I didn't move. I just watched, waited, and listened. And that's when I realized the final truth. I could follow the rules, I could obey them, I could try to keep them. But the dead don't obey rules, they wait, and they ask questions you're never ready to answer. Story number 3, I know what you're thinking. If the creatures were real, I should have left. But that's the thing, I did leave, twice, and each time the mountain brought me back. So before anyone judges me, before they call me a liar, just listen. I never broke the rules. Except once. And that's why I can't tell you whether the person in my bed at home is still my wife or one of them. You want to know the truth? Fine, I'll start with this. The first night I worked alone, I heard someone whisper my name from outside the snow-covered window, and I almost opened the door. That's not something I've admitted out loud before. Even now, saying it here feels like I'm opening a wound I've spent months stitching shut. But if you want to understand what happened, if you want to understand why I can't sleep at home, why my wife keeps asking what I'm hiding, then you have to start with that first night. The night no one here talks about. The night we don't mention. I worked the graveyard shift at the Orion Peak Ski Resort. A place that looks as expensive, peaceful, and harmless as a postcard. Daytime guests see mountain views, fireplaces, hot cocoa, ski lifts, and smiling employees. What they don't see are the laminated rules posted only in the staff break room, right by the time clock where the night shift checks in. Most employees never even learn those rules exist, because most never work past midnight. And honestly, that used to be fine by me. I thought the rules were a formality, safety procedures for icy grounds, wildlife, and the usual mountain hazards. Nothing supernatural, nothing dramatic, just common sense at high altitude. At least, that's what I told myself. Henry was the first person to brief me. He's the night shift lead, mid-50s, face that looks carved out of winter itself, voice that never raises no matter what's happening. He's the kind of man who looks like he hasn't slept since the 80s and has made peace with that fact. The first time we met, he slid a clipboard across the staff desk and said, Sign that you understand the rules. I skimmed them and laughed, thinking it was some kind of deadpan staff initiation ritual. Henry didn't smile. He tapped the first rule with a pen. Rule 1. Do not leave the lodge after 1:30 a.m. for any reason. I joked, not even for a smoke. Henry didn't blink. Especially not for a smoke. I signed anyway. After all, I needed the job. Night shifts pay better than day shifts, and I'm not exactly the type who fits into cheerful morning service roles. I like quiet. I like empty hallways and distant elevator dings. Working nights suited me, still does, if I'm being honest, but that first hour alone on shift showed me things I wasn't ready for. The hallway lights operate on motion sensors. If no one is walking, they stay dark, so when a light flickered on down the far end of the lobby corridor at 1:12 a.m., I should have been able to walk down and catch whoever triggered it. But by the time I turned the corner, nobody was there. No footsteps, no doors closing, no sounds at all. Just that soft click of lights switching off again, one by one, as if something had walked away from me. I radioed Henry and told him someone was wandering around after hours. He answered without a second's hesitation. Stay where you are. Don't call out. Wait until the lights shut off. His voice had that eerie calm, like this wasn't a surprise, like he'd been expecting it. 15 minutes later, he walked down from the security office and nodded to himself when he confirmed the sensors had shut down. Then he looked at me, not concerned, not threatened, just studying me. You handled it fine, he said. Handled what? There was nobody there. He gave a small shrug. That's why you handled it fine. I didn't sleep well that morning. The next rule came into play on night 3. It was 1:46 a.m. when someone knocked on the staff entrance door. 3 slow knocks, not rushed, not desperate. I went to check the security monitor and saw a figure in a ski jacket, goggles pushed on top of their head, snow dusting the shoulders. Standard late-night straggler, I assumed. People get lost on the trails all the time, especially drunk guests who think they're invincible. I reached for the intercom to ask their room number, but before I pressed the button, the figure tilted their head upward and looked directly into the camera. Not at the lens, no. It looked like they were staring straight into my eyes through the screen. And then, clear as day, I heard my name whispered behind the glass. Let me in. I froze. I swear I hadn't turned the intercom on. I hadn't touched anything, but I heard it anyway, like the voice came from just over my shoulder. That's when Henry walked in, silent as always, and put a hand over mine before I touched the intercom. If you hear knocking, he murmured, don't answer. Even if it sounds like someone you know. I swallowed. You're scaring the new people for no reason. He didn't respond. He just stood beside me, waiting, staring at the monitor until the figure outside slowly turned and walked into the blowing snow. Good, he finally said. They give up quicker when you don't acknowledge them. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. That the next day I paid more attention to the rules. Rule 2. Do not talk to guests after 1:15 a.m. unless they are inside the building and fully verified. Rule 3. If someone begs you to let them in, verify their ID badge, then verify the face. If something feels off, ignore them. Rule 4. Do not acknowledge scratching, tapping, or whispering at windows. Rule 5. After 2:10 a.m., do not look into the lodge windows directly. Only use reflections from cameras or metal surfaces. I remember reading them again and thinking, these sound like instructions for dealing with something alive, but that would be ridiculous, right? Just mountain safety, that's all. High altitude anxiety, sleep deprivation, overactive imagination. That's what I told myself. That's what you'd tell yourself too. And yet, every night after, the noises got worse. Soft tapping against the glass. Light footsteps on the roof when no snow should have been falling. Once, during a hallway patrol, I heard motion sensors click on ahead of me, one after another, like someone invisible was walking 10 feet in front of me. I tried to laugh that off. Henry didn't. He looked at me across the shift desk one morning, and said quietly, if you start believing this place is normal, you won't last long. I should have believed him because people have started asking why Emily hasn't been at work since last Thursday. And it's complicated. She misunderstood who was knocking out, and I'm not ready to talk about that. Not yet. But I will. Soon. I shouldn't be telling you this part. Not yet. But if you want the truth, well, the truth doesn't come in neat packages. It comes in fragments, like shards of ice in a snowstorm, and you have to piece them together yourself. That's what happened that night. The night the rules finally broke. I've gone over it 100 times, replayed it in my head, and every time I try to explain it, I hear Henry's voice warning me, telling me not to trust my own memories. And yet, here I am, talking to you. It started with a knock. Not a normal knock, not a polite hello, may I come in. Knock. This was slow, deliberate, echoing across the lodge like it belonged to the walls themselves. I knew immediately who or what it was. The rules flashed in my mind like a warning siren. Do not answer. Do not acknowledge. Verify the badge. Check the face. I couldn't. I had already made my first mistake. Emily. My Emily. She had called my name through the storm. She sounded frantic, perfectly, impossibly like her. I saw her silhouette on the monitors, snow clinging to her shoulders, goggles pushed up, mouth moving silently in the cold. And I opened the door. I don't know why. Something in me refused to obey. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was weakness. Maybe it was the desperate need to hear a voice that made sense in this mountain of shadows. The second she stepped inside, I felt it. Wrongness. It was subtle at first, the way her eyes lingered too long, the way her fingers flexed unnaturally in the light. Then the smell hit me. Perfume, yes, but faintly metallic, like iron mixed with snow. I stepped back instinctively, tripping over a chair, and she smiled. Too wide, her teeth glinted unnaturally under the fluorescent hall lights. Henry appeared from nowhere, as always, calm, deadly calm. You let her in, he said, voice flat as ice. She sounded like my wife. I stammered. Henry shook his head slowly. They always sound like someone you trust. I didn't understand. I wanted to. I wanted to grab her hand and tell her it was okay, that she could come inside. But Henry's presence pressed down on me like the weight of the mountain itself. His ice-cold assessing made it clear. I had already crossed the line. The lodge felt alive that night. The walls shifted slightly in the corners of my vision. Shadows stretched, recoiled, and then disappeared. Every reflective surface seemed to shimmer with movement that wasn't mine. The rules I had memorized for weeks, rules I'd trusted with my sanity now, felt like flimsy paper in the teeth of a storm. Rule 5. Do not look into windows after 2:10 a.m. I had ignored it. I had failed. I had failed. Emily, or whatever she had become, moved closer. I noticed details I hadn't before. Her pupils too wide. The way the snow crunched under her boots in uneven, impossible rhythms. The faint scraping sound that didn't match her steps. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I tried to move, but my legs were frozen. Henry acted, quick, precise, silent. He reached for a bag I didn't see until he slammed it over her head. There was a muffled scream, high, shrill, metallic, and then silence. He glanced at me. Rules exist for a reason, he said. I nodded, swallowing my terror. But inside I was breaking apart. I had broken the rules. And for what? For a glimpse of something that wasn't even real. Something that had taken my wife's voice, my wife's face, to lure me into making the worst mistake of my life. Later, when the adrenaline faded, I wandered the hallways, checking every sensor, every reflective surface, every locked door. Nothing was out of place except for the emptiness that Emily left behind. The snow outside the lodge had drifted into unnatural mounds, wind twisting in directions that defied logic. I felt them then, watching, waiting. I don't know how long they had been there, or if they had always been there. Henry never explained. He never would. And then, the phone call. I don't know who called. Not really. The line was dead silent for the first 5 seconds. Then a voice, trembling, familiar but impossible. She's not your wife. You need to fix this. Henry's voice. Maybe. Or maybe something else mimicking him. I couldn't tell. I dropped the phone and it shattered on the linoleum. I ran, heart pounding, past every darkened hallway. The monitors flickering like old film reels, and all I could think was, what did I just unleash? By dawn I was sitting in the security office, shaking, notebook open in front of me, scribbling down every rule, every motion sensor, every sound I had heard. I told myself that if I wrote it all down, I could make sense of it. I could prove to myself I was sane. But the notes looked wrong. Lines I didn't write appeared. Shadows seemed to crawl across the paper. And worst of all, I wasn't sure anymore if I had imagined Emily entirely, or if she had really stood there, laughing that impossible smile at me. Henry was gone that morning. I checked his office. Empty. No note, no warning, no sign he had ever been there, except the smell of his cologne lingering faintly in the air, mixed with something else, something acrid, like iron. My stomach turned. I realized then that the lodge no longer felt safe. The rules weren't just guidelines. They were the only barrier between me and whatever waits outside. I left the lodge after my shift, but it didn't matter. I came home. I saw my wife, asleep in her bed. She cooked breakfast, laughed at some joke on the radio, kissed me good morning, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't entirely her. Her smile was slightly too slow. Her eyes didn't track me correctly. I told myself I was paranoid, traumatized, but the words felt hollow, because that night, I realized the horrifying truth. Breaking the rules isn't just dangerous, it's irreversible. And now I'm left with the question I dread asking aloud. If Emily or the thing that looked like her can imitate someone I love so perfectly, how do I know that the person I came home to is real? How do I know that Henry even existed? Or that this isn't all a trap? So I tell you this, in case you ever find yourself alone in the snow, staring at someone familiar through a frosted window, pleading to come inside, follow the rules, always. Because the minute you don't, they'll step inside, and then, you'll never be sure what's left. I opened the door, and now I don't know who's standing on the other side of mine. If you've been following so far, then you already know the rules. You know Henry, you know Emily, or at least a version of her that drew me into breaking every warning I had been given, but nothing prepares you for what comes next. That night, the mountain stopped being just a backdrop. It became something else, something alive, patient, and hungry. And I was in the middle of it. It started like any other shift. Snow falling in sheets, wind howling around the eaves. I walked the hallways, notebook in hand, checking motion sensors, lights, and doors. Every creak and groan of the lodge sounded amplified, like the building itself was breathing. The air was thick with tension, an unshakable dread that coiled around my chest. And then I heard footsteps on the roof, slow, methodical, one after another, circling the lodge, stopping occasionally, as if listening. I froze. The rules flashed in my mind: never acknowledge footsteps on the roof. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps, echoing through the snow-swept night. Not at the staff entrance. At the main lodge door. The kind of knock that pierces the silence and crawls under your skin. I checked the monitors. No one outside. Not a soul. Yet the knocking continued, rhythmic, insistent, almost human. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But something, maybe stubbornness, maybe madness, kept me rooted to the spot. And then I saw movement in the reflection of the lobby's polished floor. A figure familiar. My wife's shape. Emily's shape. And yet, wrong. The figure stepped closer, and I saw the details I had tried to ignore. Eyes too large, movements slightly delayed, head tilting in ways that no human should. The snow outside pressed against the glass in impossible patterns, wind gusting in directions it shouldn't. I realized I had broken the rules again, simply by watching, simply by acknowledging her presence. Henry appeared suddenly, as always, but this time, he wasn't calm. His face was pale, drawn, eyes darting across the monitors. "They've learned faster than I expected," he said, almost to himself. "What who?" I asked, panic rising. "The ones who imitate, the ones we never name. They take what we love, step inside our lives, and we can't tell the difference. Not until it's too late." I wanted to argue, to deny it, to tell him he was insane. But then the phone rang, not the office phone, not the security line, the phone on my nightstand at home. Ringing, in the lodge. I froze. There was no one there but me. I picked it up. Silence, then a whisper. "She's waiting for you." The line went dead. My chest ached. My mind raced. I knew who she meant. Emily, or whatever had taken her form. The lodge had become a trap. The rules, my only defense, were collapsing under my mistakes. I ran through the hallways, checking cameras, doors, mirrors. Every reflective surface seemed to shimmer with movement, faces flashing, hands pressing against glass, whispers crawling through the vents. I realized then that the lodge itself was watching, amplifying the presence of the ones I had already acknowledged. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then came the scream, high-pitched, sharp, cutting through the wind outside. Emily, someone else. I couldn't tell. I grabbed the closest flashlight, swinging it toward the staircase. Shadows danced violently across the walls, shapes bending unnaturally, disappearing when I blinked. The rules, Henry's rules, echoed in my mind. Useless now. I had learned the truth too late. Once the rules are broken, there is no going back. I ran toward the staff entrance, hoping to escape. The snow outside had piled into impossible drifts, forming shapes that looked like twisted faces frozen mid-scream. My lungs burned. Every step was met with resistance, as if the mountain itself tried to hold me in place. I glanced up at the roof. Footsteps still circled, faster now. I could almost hear laughter, or maybe it was my own. And then I saw her, Emily, or the imitation. She stood at the edge of the snow, too close for safety, too human to be safe. Her eyes met mine, wide, smiling, perfectly, horrifyingly still. "Open the door," she said. Her voice wasn't exactly hers. It was layered, like multiple whispers echoing over each other, all speaking at once. I hesitated. My fingers brushed the handle, and then I remembered Henry, his voice from weeks ago. They always sound like someone you trust. I backed away, and that's when the lodge seemed to shift. Hallways twisted, reflections doubled, lights flickered in patterns that didn't match the sensors. I realized something I had been avoiding. Henry wasn't here to save me. He hadn't been for days. Maybe he never would be. Maybe he had already become one of them. The snowstorm intensified. Outside, shapes moved unnaturally, peering through every window. Shadows pressed against the glass, scratching, tapping, whispering. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, to obey the rules, but I had already failed too many times. My only thought, my only chance, was to survive the night and hope the rules would reset at dawn. I don't know if I made it out. I don't know if Emily is alive. I don't know if Henry ever existed in the first place, and I don't know if this lodge, or this mountain, will ever let anyone leave unscathed. But I do know this: the mountain keeps its own. And if you ever find yourself alone in the snow, hearing a voice that sounds like someone you love, do not answer. Do not open the door. Do not break the rules. Because once you do, the mountain remembers, and it will never forget. I opened the door, and now I'm not sure who or what is standing on the other side. The door, and now I'm not sure who or what is standing on the other side. Story number 4, I saw him standing at the pump, but he didn't have a face. And yes, I still served him. Maybe I shouldn't have, but you're going to want to hear why. I shouldn't be telling you this. Honestly, I shouldn't. But it's easier to speak to a camera than to anyone else, especially when I'm the only one out here. My name's Alex. I work nights at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. And no, it's not the kind of place you stop by for a cup of coffee or a quick snack. The highway doesn't even technically exist. It's just frozen dirt and snow, stretching endlessly, like someone's careless brushstroke on a white canvas. There's a rule here, one rule that no one bothers to explain. Don't serve customers without faces. That's it. The why part, they won't tell you. Or maybe I don't want to know. But it sticks in your head anyway, like a warning carved into your skull. I've been here for a week, and I've never even seen a hint of what that means. Until tonight it started the usual way. I clocked in at 7 p.m. The fluorescent lights flickering in that half-dead way they do when they're about to burn out. Outside, the wind was whipping snow into frantic spirals. You can hear it if you've ever been alone in a blizzard. You feel it crawling into your ears and through your ribs. Every sound is exaggerated. Every shadow looks like it's moving when it's not. I was talking to Jessie on the phone, my only lifeline besides the surveillance cameras. Another quiet night, she said, her voice tinny through the headset. You sure you're okay out there? I laughed, but not the confident laugh I wanted. It was the kind of laugh you use to convince yourself you're fine, even though you're not. Yeah, I said, I've got this. Nothing weird ever happens. That was the first mistake. I was stocking the shelves, the harsh smell of motor oil and antifreeze filling the air, when I heard it, a tap at the glass door. I froze. The wind was screaming, but this sound was distinct, slow, deliberate, almost patient. I walked over and peered outside, squinting against the storm, and that's when I saw him. Or it. The customer at pump 3 had no face. Not eyes, not nose, not even a mouth. Just smooth, pale skin where a face should have been, stretched tight over a skull that looked almost human, and yet, it was all wrong. My heart froze in my chest, but curiosity or stupidity won. I unlocked the door. I let it in. Hi, I said, my voice higher than I realized. No response. Of course, there couldn't be. I tried again. What can I get you? The figure moved closer, but I swear, it didn't breathe. Its presence was like cold water filling the room, and I could feel the shadows stretching toward it. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe exhaustion, maybe the isolation was finally breaking my brain. But I served him anyway. A soda, some chips. The whole time my mind was screaming, don't do this, don't do this. Yet my hands moved, mechanically, like I was already halfway gone, like some part of me wanted to see what would happen if the rules were broken. The figure reached out a hand, strangely normal, and took the items. No thanks, no nod, nothing, just the silence, thick and heavy, pressing down on me. I stepped back, unsure whether to breathe or run, and then, it left. Just like that. Back out into the snow, disappearing into the storm. I locked the door and pressed my back against it, shaking, phone in hand. Jessie, I whispered, you're not going to believe this. But before I could explain, a new sound cut through the storm, slow dragging footsteps, circling the station. I swear to God they didn't belong to anyone I could see, and yet I could feel them, all around me. As if the snow itself had teeth. I don't know how long I stayed pressed against that door. My chest burned, my fingers numb. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the wind, but then I caught movement in the reflection of the window, a shadow, taller than any person, crouched in the snow, watching me, and then it was gone. I tell you this now because I need someone to know. Someone has to hear what's happening, and maybe, if you're watching this, you'll understand. Or maybe you'll think I'm lying. I don't care, but I know what I saw, and it's not over. The night stretches on, the storm rages, and out there, beyond the safety of these flickering lights, I can feel them waiting, faceless, silent, patient, and I don't know if I'll make it through this first night intact. I can only hope I survive until morning. I'm not going to lie, last night broke something in me. I don't know if it was fear or exhaustion or just the snow pressing against the walls until reality itself felt thin. When the storm finally eased, I kept the doors locked, staring out at the empty highway, half expecting the faceless figure to reappear, but it didn't, not yet. That's the thing about out here, even when nothing is happening, your mind convinces you that it is. Every creak, every whisper of wind becomes something alive, something watching. Jesse called around noon, voice hesitant. Alex, you okay? You sound off. I lied. Of course. I'm fine. Just the storm, you know. The words tasted sour in my mouth. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to scream that someone or something without a face had walked into my gas station. But then, what would she do? She'd think I was losing it. Maybe I am. I started going through the old logs from previous clerks. Not much, just notes on deliveries, odd phone calls, and the occasional weather warnings. But buried in one file, almost invisible, was a single line. Do not serve faceless customers under any circumstances. Violators are responsible for consequences. That's it. No explanation, no story, no warning, just the words. I reread them over and over, trying to make sense. Consequences for what? For serving what? Then came the voices, that it started small, almost playful. Whispers at the edge of my hearing, like someone muttering just out of reach. I told myself it was the wind. I rationalized. I journaled it. I recorded it on camera. It's the isolation. I whispered to the lens. This place gets to you after a while. I'm fine. You're fine. We're fine. But the whispers grew louder as night approached, shifting into sentences that made no sense. You shouldn't have opened the door, one said another. We're waiting inside. And then I saw the first shadow. It wasn't a shadow like the others cast by snowdrifts or the flickering fluorescent lights. This one moved independently, slipping across the walls, curling around corners. I thought maybe a raccoon or some other animal had wandered in, but the footsteps didn't match anything I'd ever known. They were slow, deliberate, almost human, but wrong. Wrong in a way that made me catch my breath before I even realized I'd been holding it. I called Jessie again, though part of me wanted to scream at the camera instead. There's something in the station, I said. Her voice came through, calm but tense. Are you sure? No, I admitted. I mean, yes, I saw a shadow, or a person, or, I don't know. I'm seeing things, she sighed. Listen, Alex, whatever you're hearing, keep calm, keep notes. Just don't panic. Easier said than done. Hours passed. The snowstorm returned, heavier this time, rattling the station like it wanted to tear it apart. I tried to track the noises, following the whispers, the scraping steps along the walls, the occasional thump behind the shelves. Nothing made sense. Sometimes I swore I saw footprints in the dust that weren't there the moment I turned around. Other times the lights flickered, and for a heartbeat the station was pitch black. In that darkness, I could swear I felt a presence leaning over my shoulder, breathing cold into my neck. I spun around. Nothing. By 2 a.m., I had to admit it. The rule wasn't just a warning. It was a shield. Something inside the station, something tied to those faceless customers, was waiting for mistakes. My hand shook as I wrote it all down in my notebook, trying to piece together what consequences might mean. Was it death, madness, or worse, being changed into one of them? My mind raced. I couldn't stop thinking about the customer from last night. That smooth, empty face, staring without seeing, taking what I offered. Did it know I'd broken the rule? Did it care? The phone rang again. Only this time it wasn't Jessie. The line was static, harsh and crackling. And then a voice, low and impossible, whispered, "You served him." No other words. Just that. My heart slammed into my ribs. I dropped the phone. When I picked it up, silence. Static. Gone. I spent the next hour double-checking every door, every window, every lock. Nothing was open. Nothing had moved, except for the shadow. Always the shadow, watching, waiting. And then, just when I thought I might be losing it completely, I saw the first sign that made me doubt everything again. The footprints outside the gas station weren't human. They were smooth, featureless, and led directly from the pump to the tree line, then disappeared. As if they were never there. I can't explain it, and I won't pretend to understand. All I know is that the station isn't empty. The rule exists for a reason. One I've only begun to glimpse, and breaking it has consequences far beyond anything I imagined. I don't know if I'll survive tonight or if I'll survive the nights after, but I need you to know, someone has to know, because out there, in the snow and shadows, the faceless are patient, and they're waiting. I can't tell you exactly when it started, the creeping sense that I wasn't alone even when the station was empty. Maybe it was the snowstorm pressing against the windows, or the way shadows seemed to stretch toward me as I moved. Maybe it was the faceless customer from the first night, returning in memory, or maybe, I can't be sure. What I do know is that the station stopped being safe. I set up cameras everywhere, every corner, every shelf, even outside. I told Jesse I was being careful, that I was documenting everything for safety purposes. But I wasn't documenting safety. I was documenting survival. Every night, the cameras recorded movements I couldn't explain, shadows where no one could be, reflections in the glass that didn't match my own movements, and, occasionally, the faint shape of something. Faceless. It was subtle at first. A figure in the corner of a frame, gone by the next recording. Then the shadows seemed to follow me from room to room, curling along the edges of shelves, clinging to the walls. I would swear I felt a presence behind me while stocking the shelves, only to turn and see nothing. But I knew, I could feel, they were there, watching, waiting. And then it escalated one night. While organizing the freezer section, I heard the unmistakable scrape of footsteps, not outside, not in the snow, but inside the station. Slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. My breath caught. I froze, listening. They stopped when I did. When I started moving again, they moved again, following me, not imitating, but shadowing. It was impossible, irrational, and yet real. I grabbed my flashlight and started recording, speaking directly to the camera like I always do. I don't know what's happening, I said, voice shaking. They're following me. I can hear them. I see them, and it's not the storm. It's not the wind. It's something else. Something alive, but faceless. My hands trembled so badly that the beam of the flashlight danced across the walls. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the glass door, a figure standing behind me. Tall, faceless, the way I remembered it, but this time breathing cold into the back of my neck, making the hair on my arms stand on end. I spun around. Empty. The door frame showed nothing. The hallway, nothing. And yet, when I looked back at the reflection, it was there, closer than ever. I started talking to it. The way you talk to someone you can't ignore. What do you want? My voice was cracked. No response. Only the cold. Only the silence. Only the feeling that I had done something unforgivable by serving it the first night. And I just knew that it wasn't alone. That's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't human. They were smooth, elongated impressions pressed into the snow, tracked through the back room, the freezer, the main floor. Some led to walls. Some stopped mid-step. Some circled back like a predator playing with prey. My mind went wild. Had it been inside all along? Had it never left? I could feel the panic rising like a tide, filling every corner of my chest. I called Jessie one last time before the signal dropped, barely whispering. They're inside, I said. Not just outside. They're here. She tried to calm me down, but the line went static before she could respond. And then I heard slow dragging footsteps again, circling the station. This time I couldn't convince myself it was the wind. This time, I knew I was being hunted. I barricaded myself in the office, laptop in hand, recording everything for whoever might find it later. The shadows moved under the door, curling like smoke, reaching toward me. I tried to make sense of it, rationalize, remember the rule, don't serve faceless customers. Too late, too late. My hands shook as I typed, my eyes scanning the room. Every monitor flickered, every shadow flickered with it, and then I saw a new face, or rather, the lack of one. Not the same as before, but faceless all the same, standing by the entrance of the freezer. It tilted its head at me, curious, patient, hungry. I realized, too late, that I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't hallucinating. They had followed me, into my life, and into this godforsaken station. I don't know how long I stayed in that office. Minutes, hours, it all blurred. The shadows stretched, merged, and disappeared at random, and then the lights went out completely, leaving me in darkness thick enough to choke on. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and ragged, and the faintest sound of movement around me, feet dragging, sliding, circling. I whispered to the camera, "I don't know how to stop this. I don't know if I can." By the time dawn broketh, you can call it that, in Alaska, I was sitting on the floor, shaking, staring at the office door. Silence. The storm had passed. The snow lay heavy and still outside. No footprints, no shadows, just the faint, lingering cold that refused to leave the room. And I knew, deep in my gut, that it wasn't over. They were still out there, waiting, patient, and they would come again. I don't know how to start this. Maybe I shouldn't. But if you've been following along, you need to know. Or at least, you deserve a version of the truth. The station isn't safe. It hasn't been safe since the first night, and I think I've finally realized what the rule meant. I woke up, or maybe I never slept. I can't remember, to silence. The storm had ended. The snow lay thick, untouched outside. But inside, the shadows were different. They weren't creeping along the walls. They weren't hiding in corners. They were waiting, patient, like hunters biding their time. And I knew as soon as I looked in the reflection of the glass doors that some of them weren't outside at all. They were here, inside me, inside my mind. I keep thinking about the first faceless customer, how I served it anyway, despite knowing the rule. That choice, it wasn't just a mistake, it was the beginning. Everything that's happening now, the whispers, the shadows, the cold creeping into my chest, is a consequence. And yet, when I try to explain it to myself, the memory slips. I can't remember the face exactly, or the hands, or even the way it moved. It's all a blur. Maybe I want it to be. Maybe the faceless are better left unseen. Then came the new arrivals. Not customers exactly. More like echoes of people who used to be here, or maybe never were. They walk silently, faceless, gliding over the floor. I see them in the corner of my eye, and then they're gone. I hear voices whispering, sometimes in Jesse's tone, sometimes in mine. The camera caught some of them. I've watched the footage countless times, but the more I try to understand, the less sense it makes. Sometimes the frames loop, showing the same movement over and over. Sometimes the faceless are in places they couldn't possibly reach. And I'm beginning to think that's the point. They exist to break you, to make you doubt what is real. I tried talking to them once. I whispered, "Why are you here?" Nothing. Silence. And then, in the darkness behind me, I felt the pressure of their presence. A faceless figure leaned over my shoulder, so close that the cold hit my skin, but I refused to turn. Not because I was brave. I was terrified. I knew that looking at them would change something inside me. And maybe, in some twisted way, I already have changed. Days or nights blurred together. I can't tell anymore. Time loses meaning when you're alone with faceless watchers. I started leaving small offerings on the counter. Soda cans, chips, even scraps of paper I wrote my fears on. Maybe it's appeasement. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe I'm convincing myself that feeding them will keep them from taking me entirely. I don't know what happens to those who disobey. But I've seen enough shadows to understand I'm not ready to find out. Then I saw myself on camera. Not the reflection, not the shadow, but me. Sitting at the counter, talking to a camera, shaking, muttering about faceless people. Except my eyes were empty. Not entirely blank, but missing something vital. I watched, frozen, as the version of me reached for an item on the shelf that wasn't there, smiled at something no one else could see, and I realized with a cold certainty, they're not just outside, they're inside. Inside everyone who breaks the rule. And now, inside me, I tried calling Jesse. The line was dead, and then the whispers started again. Louder this time, closer, not from the corners of the station, but from my own head. "You served them. You invited them in. You're one of us now." I covered my ears, screamed, tried to shut it out, but it didn't stop. It couldn't, and I think that's the cruelest part. They don't need to enter. Once the rule is broken, they are already there. By morning, or what felt like morning, I found myself standing outside. The door had opened. I don't remember opening it. The snow was deep, untouched except for the footprints. My footprints leading toward the highway. Or maybe not mine. It didn't matter. Behind me, the station was silent. The fluorescent lights flickering weakly. No shadows. No figures. Only the lingering cold. I turned back once, camera in hand, and for a split second, I thought I saw the first faceless customer in the snow, watching, patient. But when I blinked, it was gone. The emptiness remained, but the sense of being hunted never left. I understand now. I'm not reporting from a gas station. I'm reporting from the edge of what I still am. Because serving the faceless isn't just a rule you break. It's a chain you wear. Invisible, permanent, and inescapable. So here I am, talking to you, telling you what I saw, what I felt, what I still feel every second of every day. And maybe it's the truth, maybe it's a lie, maybe, by the time you finish listening, I'll already be gone or already become like them. I can't tell anymore. All I know is this: don't serve the faceless. Don't let them in. And if you ever see one, don't even look, because the ones you can't face aren't outside. They're inside, and now, they're inside me. They're inside me. Story number 5. I thought I was in charge here, that I knew every tree, every trail, every camper, but last night, the campers changed, and so did the rules, though I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to tell you what happened. I always thought I knew this place. Every tree, every trail, every creaking cabin in this Utah campground has my fingerprints on it. I've been managing it for years, and I've always believed that gave me control. But last night, I realized control is an illusion. The first thing I need you to understand is this: not everything here is as it seems. Even me. It started subtly. I was doing my nightly rounds, flashlight in hand, boots crunching over frost-hardened leaves. The fog was thick, unnatural almost, curling around the trees like smoke from a dying fire. The wind carried faint murmurs, whispers that shouldn't have been there. At first, I told myself it was the usual forest sounds, branches rubbing together, coyotes howling in the distance, but there was something different, calculated, familiar, almost. Like someone was listening to me just as intently as I was watching them. I passed cabin 7, where I knew old man Harris stayed. He's been coming here every summer for decades. Usually, he nods politely, muttering a cheerful "evening, kiddo," but that night he didn't. He just stood in the shadows outside his cabin, staring at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, voice low. I laughed it off, said something about the fog playing tricks on his eyes, but his gaze didn't leave me as I walked past. The campers themselves were acting strange. Little things at first: a missing lantern here, a misplaced backpack there, but they grew bolder. At one point, I swear I saw a group of campers standing silently in the tree line, their faces pale and blank, watching the fire as if it held some secret code. When I approached, they scattered without a word. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, maybe a prank, but that little knot in my stomach was growing, twisting tighter with every step I took. By the time I reached the central fire pit, the forest had become oppressive, the fog swallowing light and sound alike. Shadows twisted unnaturally, elongated like they had their own will. I flicked my flashlight around, and for a moment, I swear this is true, I thought I saw someone or something sliding behind a tree, impossibly fast, before disappearing entirely. My heart raced, but I shook it off. I've worked here too long to let imagination take over. Then came the first clear sign that things were different, scrawled into the dirt by the old oak at the edge of the clearing, in letters that looked freshly carved: "Obey the moon." I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hands as I knelt to examine the message. Who could have done this? And why here? The ink-red light from the moon above, full, round, uncomfortably bright, made the words glow faintly on the forest floor. I couldn't tell if my mind was playing tricks or if something had actually written them while I wasn't looking. I told myself not to panic. I'm the manager. I've dealt with lost campers, pranks, drunken teenagers, bears. Surely, a weird message in the dirt wasn't going to break me. But even as I walked back to the ranger's cabin, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig, felt deliberate, directed at me. I began to question things I should have been certain about. Did I see the campers moving in ways they shouldn't have? Did that shadow really duck behind the tree, or had I imagined it entirely? I reached cabin 3, where the night's chill had seeped into my bones. I tried calling the office line to check in with the security cams, only to find the line dead. My phone, too, showed no signal. That's impossible. This place is usually covered with a perfect grid of reception. My pride, my confidence, began to erode. Control was slipping. Then Harris appeared again, materializing from the fog like he had been part of it all along. "They're watching," he whispered, almost amused. "They always are. You'll learn soon enough." And just like that, he turned and disappeared into the woods. No goodbyes, no explanation, just the whisper of his presence fading like the echo of a dream. By the time I finally returned to my cabin, the forest had gone quiet, too quiet, The usual night sounds owl calls. The whisper of wind through pine needles had vanished entirely, replaced by the distant, soft rustle of leaves, rhythmic, patient. I sat on the edge of my bed, flashlight still in hand, staring at the dirt-streaked floor outside my window. My reflection in the glass didn't look like mine. It flickered with the moonlight, blurred at the edges, as if something had pressed against it from the other side. And then I remembered the dirt. Obey the moon. I don't know why, but I felt like I had been warned. Not by the campers, not by the forest, not even by Harris, but by the place itself, like it had rules I didn't understand, and I was already late on the first one. I didn't sleep. Not that night. Not ever, really, if the forest had its way. And that's how it started, the first full moon in my campground. The night I realized the trees, the fog, the shadows, and maybe even the people I thought I knew were no longer mine to manage. Something was awake, something was waiting, and it was patient. I keep telling myself I overreacted that first night. Fog, shadows, a weird message in the dirt, it had to be a prank, right? That's what I kept whispering to my reflection in the cabin window, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it. But the second full moon proved that my logic was fragile, brittle as the frost on the pine needles. It began with the rules. They weren't like the ones I'd written in the handbook for campers, the fire regulations, quiet hours, no littering. No, these were different. They appeared suddenly, scrawled across cabins in what looked disturbingly like blood. At first, I thought I was seeing things. I passed cabin 9 and froze. There, smeared across the door, 3 words in jagged handwriting: do not answer. My stomach twisted. Who would do this? And why? I took a step closer, and the smell hit me before the words fully registered: a runlick, coppery. My mind tried to rationalize it. Animal attack. Spilled paint. But instinct screamed otherwise. Something in the forest was testing me, watching me. I felt the familiar knot in my chest, the same one I'd felt the first night, twisting tighter as though the forest itself had me in its grip. I wasn't alone, not really. Old Man Harris reappeared, emerging from the fog like a specter, though this time his eyes were sharper, darker. You've seen it, he said, voice low, almost a hiss. Rules change with the moon. And tonight, he let the words hang unfinished, as though the sentence itself was a trap. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words caught in my throat. Something about his presence, how he lingered just long enough to make my skin crawl, made it impossible to speak. He turned and melted into the shadows again before I could force out a question. I decided to inspect the rest of the campground. My flashlight carved a thin slice through the fog, and every step I took seemed louder than it should have been. That's when I noticed it. More messages, more rules, not just on doors but etched into tree trunks, carved into the bark with a precision that made my stomach churn. Leave nothing behind. Do not sleep. Do not watch the forest. Each rule seemed more cruel, more impossible than the last, and each one glowed faintly under the cold light of the full moon, as though it weren't just ink or blood but alive. I tried calling out to the campers, but the air swallowed my voice. The rustling leaves, the snapping twigs, the distant calls of nocturnal animals, they all drowned me in an eerie silence that felt deliberate, purposeful. That's when I first saw the new camper. I didn't notice them approach. It was as if they had emerged from the shadows themselves, a thin figure, pale, wearing a hood that concealed their face. They stopped a few feet away, hands in pockets, tilting their head as though they were studying me, weighing me. You shouldn't be looking at them, the camper said, voice calm, almost detached. You can't know what they want. I swallowed hard. Who are you? My own voice sounded smaller than I expected. Just someone who's been here before, they replied, stepping back into the fog before I could press for more. Their words, though sparse, burned into me. Something knew the rules, knew the forest, knew the full moons better than I ever could, and they weren't telling. I spent the night moving from cabin to cabin, flashlight trembling in my hands, reading more rules, each one etched as if by an invisible hand. My heart pounded so hard it threatened to drown out the quiet sounds around me, the soft scrape of claws, or were they just branches? The lines between reality and imagination blurred. I kept convincing myself it was a prank, but every instinct I had screamed that I was alone in a forest full of something ancient and deliberate. By the time dawn started bleeding into the sky, I was exhausted, both physically and mentally. I checked my logbook, scribbled reminders to call for backup, rationalized everything I had seen. But then I noticed the last set of markings, right at the edge of the clearing near the old oak. Fresh, dark, unmistakable. Obey or leave. I froze, flashlight falling to the ground. My reflection caught in the lens of the beam a shadow of myself, trembling, half familiar, half Alien had I written these rules? No. Could I have imagined them? Maybe. My mind was fraying at the edges, my confidence dissolving in the cold morning air. And Harris, he didn't reappear that night, which was worse. His absence left a vacuum, a space for fear to settle and grow. I kept imagining his silhouette in the fog, a constant reminder that I was being watched, and perhaps, I realized, that had been the point all along. By mid-morning the campground was empty. The campers those I thought I knew were gone. Or were they hiding? I could no longer tell the difference between absence and presence. Each shadow seemed to hold a memory I couldn't trust. I kept telling myself I'd call someone, report this, get back up, but my phone was dead again. No signal, no lines, nothing. And that's when I realized something truly terrifying. The rules weren't just warnings. They weren't suggestions. They were demands. And the forest, Harris, the shadows, maybe even the campers themselves expected obedience. I spent the day pacing the ranger's cabin, trying to map out what I had seen, trying to convince myself I could make sense of it. But by nightfall, the fog returned, thicker than before. Shadows moved with intent, whispers drifted on the wind. And I understood something my pride had never let me admit. I wasn't in charge. I had never been in charge. The rules, whoever or whatever wrote them, had always been in control, and the first night had been only the beginning. I've stopped trusting my own eyes. The first 2 nights I thought it was just fog, just shadows, just a prank that had gotten out of hand. But the third full moon proved something darker, something I cannot explain and I can barely admit. Campers started disappearing. It began with the Henderson. One moment I was checking their cabin, making sure the fire pit was safe. The next, the cabin was empty. No car, no backpacks, no footprints. Just the faint smell of smoke and the cold bite of the full moon on the pine needles. I called out. I searched. I thought maybe they were hiding, playing some elaborate joke, but nothing. No answer. Just the forest, still and patient, as if it had swallowed them whole. My head started spinning. Was this my fault? Had I broken a rule without realizing it? The messages, those bloody, carved, impossible messages, made sense now in a way I didn't want to admit. They weren't suggestions. They weren't warnings. They were instructions. And I had failed. I was pacing near the central fire pit when I saw the new camper again. The one I had noticed 2 nights ago, pale and silent, lurking in the fog. They were standing just beyond the tree line, barely moving, watching me. You've seen them, the camper said. Their voice was calm, almost eerie. And now you're next. What do you mean? I demanded, though my voice trembled. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. They follow the rules, the camper said, tilting their hooded head. Or they take what they want. I didn't understand at first. Take what people? My sanity. Then I heard ether rustling. Behind me, among the trees, something moved. Quick, too quick to be human. A whisper of sound that didn't belong. A shift in the fog that made my skin crawl. I turned, and the camper was gone, leaving only a thin trail in the damp earth, leading deeper into the forest. I shouldn't have followed. I know that now. But I did. Every instinct screamed to stop, to run back to the cabins, to barricade myself in the ranger's hut. But my pride, my need to understand, drove me forward. I traced the trail, flashlight trembling, until I reached the edge of a clearing I'd never noticed before. And then I saw them. Bodies. Not exactly. Shadows, perhaps. Figures kneeling, their faces obscured, moving slowly, rhythmically, around a fire pit I hadn't seen before. The smell hit me first. Smoke mixed with something metallic, coppery, sharp. My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. And among them, I swear, I saw the Hendersons, or something that had been them, hunched and silent, staring into the flames. Their eyes weren't right. Too wide, too empty, reflecting the moonlight in a way that didn't seem human. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and heard the whisper again, this time right at my ear. You shouldn't watch. I spun. Nothing. Only fog and shadows. My mind was a mess of fear and confusion. Was this real? Was I seeing what I wanted to see, or what the forest wanted me to see? I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. Swallowed by the night, I ran. I don't remember the path back clearly, only that the trees seemed to bend around me, closing in, watching. When I finally reached the central fire pit, empty and cold, the fog had lifted slightly, but the campers were gone. All of them. Every single one. The silence was absolute, and then I heard it, soft at first, almost imperceptible, a rustle of leaves, footsteps behind me. I spun again. The new camper was there, standing just beyond the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, hood still hiding their face. They always disappear, they said. Some nights, they never come back. Some nights they come back changed. You'll see. I wanted answers. I wanted to demand explanation, but I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy, my mind swimming, and for the first time, I realized something truly terrifying. I couldn't trust myself. Had I seen the campers, or imagined them? Had I followed the shadows, or had they followed me? I backed into the ranger's cabin, locking the door behind me, my flashlight shaking in my hand. I kept hearing rustling outside, whispers drifting on the wind, shadows bending in ways they shouldn't. I tried to write everything down in my logbook, but the words seemed to change as I wrote them, twisting into forms I didn't recognize. By the time the moon dipped below the horizon, exhaustion had claimed me. I collapsed on the bed, flashlight still clutched, and tried to make sense of it all. But the forest was patient. The whispers didn't stop. The rules were waiting, and I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just a campground. It was a trap, a test, and I had no idea what I was being tested for or what would happen if I failed. I didn't sleep, not really. Even in the brief darkness, I felt them watching, waiting, patient. The missing campers, the shadows, the hooded figure, they were all part of it. And somewhere deep down I knew that if I survived the night, it wouldn't be by luck. It would be because I had learned the rules, but the rules weren't written in any handbook. They were alive, changing with every full moon, bleeding into the forest itself. And I had already broken at least one. I can't tell you exactly when it began to change me. The campground, or maybe both, but the fourth full moon arrived like a predator, silent, patient, and impossibly bright. I've kept logs, tried to record everything, but the words blur when I read them. Even now, I'm not sure how much of what I'm telling you actually happened. Maybe it all began with me. The forest was alive in a way I hadn't realized before. Every tree seemed to lean closer. Every shadow stretched unnaturally toward the center of the clearing. The wind carried voices, murmurs of campers I couldn't see, whispers that seemed to know my name. And then there was Harris. Or maybe it wasn't him. I can't be certain. He appeared at the edge of the clearing, hunched, whispering, "It's time to confess. You know the rules now." "I don't understand," I whispered back, voice trembling. But I knew I was lying to him, to myself, and to you. I had begun to realize something terrifying. I had been enforcing the rules without knowing it. Every camper gone, every shadow that moved unnaturally, every whisper in the fog, it was tied to me, and I couldn't tell whether I was the victim or the executioner. I walked through the central clearing, flashlight bouncing over tree trunks, fallen leaves, and the faint, lingering bloodstains that I tried desperately to rationalize. Paint, animal scratches, my mind argued. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. The rules were alive, yes, but they weren't separate from me. I had become part of them. The new camper appeared again, stepping out of the fog. This time, I could see their face pale, sharp, impossible to read. "You've hidden things," they said, voice soft but heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. "You've twisted the truth. You've decided what's real and what isn't. Now it's your turn." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. My memories were fragmented, twisted by panic, by fear, by something I didn't want to face. I remembered dragging supplies, moving bodies or shadows, moving campers from one place to another. I remembered rules scrawled in dirt and blood, and I remembered smiling as I enforced them. I wanted to scream, but the forest swallowed the sound before it escaped. I stumbled backward, flashlight falling, and saw something I can't describe clearly. Shapes camper-shaped, human-shaped, but wrong, gathered in the fog, circling me, waiting, their faces blurred in my vision, merging with the shadows of trees. And I realized, with a hollow, sinking feeling, that I wasn't just watching the forest. I was part of it. The rules weren't hunting the campers. I was backed into the old ranger's cabin, locking the door behind me, panting, shaking, trying to make sense of it. The flashlight cast long, uneven shadows across the walls, moving as if alive. And then I saw it, a message scratched into the wood of the door. Not there before. Obey or join. My reflection in the window was wrong. My eyes were wider, hollow. My hands trembled, leaving smudges of dirt or blood or something else. I tried to record myself, to tell someone, to leave proof of what happened. The camera shook, and my words came out garbled, fragmented. The truth refused to be spoken clearly. I couldn't even trust myself to tell it accurately. To be spoken clearly. I couldn't even trust myself to tell it accurately. And then Harris, or his likeness, appeared inside the cabin. Or maybe I had imagined him. "You've always known," he said. "The rules, the moon, the campers. They obey you as much as you obey them. Confess." I couldn't, or maybe I didn't want to. But the forest, the fog, the shadows, the whispers, they forced it from me. I whispered to the emptiness. I've done it. I've followed the rules. I've moved them, guided them, hidden them. The campers, the shadows, they obey because I obey, because I am the rules now. Silence, the kind of silence that isn't absence but wait. Then the wind carried soft, approving whispers. Or maybe it was laughter. I couldn't tell. My pulse raced. I felt as though the trees themselves were breathing, leaning in to listen to my confession, judging me, reshaping reality around me. But when I looked outside, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing the forest as it always was and never was. Shadows lingered in impossible angles. Footprints led nowhere and everywhere. The new camper was gone. The Hendersons, the other missing campers, they were gone too, or perhaps they had never been there at all. Dot and me. I don't know what I am anymore. Part of me wants to run, to leave, to call someone, anyone, but another part knows it's useless. I am bound to this place, the rules, the moon. Perhaps that's why I'm telling you this now, a warning, or perhaps it's another part of the confession, a way to manipulate someone else into following the rules I once broke and enforced. I can't be sure. The moon is full tonight, brighter than ever. I stand at the edge of the clearing, flashlight in hand, staring at the blood-streaked dirt, the carved messages, the impossible shapes in the trees. I feel the rules crawling beneath my skin, weaving into my bones, shaping me. I am the manager. I am the forest. I am the rules. And soon, you will understand, too. Stand, too. Story number 4. Look. Before you judge me, you need to understand enough. This would have happened if the trains had stayed on their side of the tracks. And yes, I know how insane that sounds. But you weren't there that night, when the last train arrived without a driver. I shouldn't be alive right now at least, not according to the records kept in that station ledger. But before you roll your eyes or click away, just listen, because this all started long before the first train arrived without a driver. It began the day I signed the contract for the old North Point station and convinced myself it was finally time to leave everything behind, even if I wasn't completely honest about why. I told people I bought the station for peace, a fresh start, some cheap real estate, far from the noise and mess of the city. That was the version I repeated to myself during the 12-hour drive into the wilderness. But there was something else, something heavier, something I still struggled to put into words. You ever want a new beginning so badly that you pretend the past never happened? That was me, or at least that's the story I choose to tell. Whether it's true, I'll let you decide. The highway ended around noon, and the weather shifted as if something unseen recognized I was getting close. Snow fell slow and heavy, blanketing the long stretch of frozen pines around the station. North Point looked like it had been abandoned decades, agoristed rails, peeling paint, and a sign that barely held itself together in the wind. The kind of place that didn't feel just empty, but forgotten, as though even the land itself decided not to look at it anymore. I should have turned around then. Most sane people would have. But I had already invested too much money I didn't technically have. If you want me to be completely transparent, and I needed this place to work. I needed something in my life to finally work. Elliot was waiting for me outside the station doors, bundled in a fraying coat that had clearly seen more winters than I had. His beard was silver white, and his eyes looked tired, not in the way old men get tired, but in the way people who've seen too much get tired. He nodded, not offering a hand. "You're late," he said, not the way he said it. I wasn't entirely sure if he meant for the appointment, or something else. I tried to laugh it off. Road was icy. His expression didn't move. "You should be inside before dark." That was our introduction. No warm welcome. No congratulations on the purchase. Just a warning delivered with the certainty of someone who'd watched a lot of idiots make a lot of bad decisions. Maybe he already knew I was going to be one of them. Inside. The station was exactly what I expected. Antique benches that still smelled faintly of varnish, long dark windows rimmed in frost, paint bubbling from years of cold, and a cracked tile, floor that echoed footsteps in a way that made you feel like you weren't walking alone. But the strangest part's the part that didn't make sense was the clock hanging above the ticket booth. Old brass frame, glass face, hand wound mechanism, still ticking. No electricity, no maintenance. Yet every second counted forward with mechanical precision. Its hands crawling toward midnight like it had somewhere important to be. I asked Elliot how long the clock had been running. Longer than you've been alive, he muttered. I asked more questions. Instead, I shrugged it off and assumed he was joking. The tour was short. The waiting room, the office, the storage hall, the upstairs apartment where I'd be living. Everything was cold, but that was normal. It was February in northern Canada. Still, there was a kind of chill that didn't feel environmental. The kind that creeps under your skin and curls around your heartbeat. You'll want to know the rules, Elliot finally said as we finished inspecting the furnace. His tone was flat and threatening, not dramatic, just matter-of-fact. 3 of them. They're simple enough. I leaned against a cracked door frame, arms crossed.
Sure.
Fire exits, power lines, local wildlife. He didn't blink. No lights on after midnight. I raised an eyebrow. And doors stay closed once the last whistle sounds. I chuckled. Couldn't help it. He didn't. And the most important, you do not speak to the passengers that aren't meant to exist. I thought he was messing with me, an old caretaker hazing the clueless new owner. Maybe he even wanted to scare me away. But looking back, the tremor in his breath wasn't theatrical. It was memory. You follow the rules after midnight, he continued, voice dropping low, or you won't last a week. Most people would have pressed for details. I just waved him off and said something like, right, ghosts, forbidden, trains, spooky, station, law. Got it. The kind of smug city sarcasm people use when they don't want to admit they're uncomfortable. He wasn't amused. You laugh now, he said, stepping close enough that I saw the worry settle like ice around his eyes, but you won't be laughing when the clock strikes 12. I should have asked him what happened before. I should have asked how many owners came before me, and why none of their names appeared on official property records. But I didn't. Pride, stupidity, denial, pick whichever fits the version of me you believe. We finished the walkthrough mostly in silence. The wind outside rose and screamed through cracks in the wood, making the station feel alive, awake in a way old buildings shouldn't be. Elliot locked every door with quiet precision, then handed me a ring of antique keys. I'll be back before sunset tomorrow. Don't do anything reckless until then, I smirked. I'll try not to burn the place down. He didn't smile back. Fire would be merciful. And then he left. I spent the rest of the evening unpacking, trying to convince myself I wasn't unsettled. I told myself the wind was wind, the ticking clock was just mechanics. And old caretakers tell spooky stories because they're bored. But deep down, I already felt it. The station wasn't just old. It was waiting, listening, measuring something I didn't understand yet. Because even though it was only 9:17 p.m., the ticking clock above the ticket counter sounded like it was already counting down to midnight hand at the moment. I'd learnt why those rules existed, and why people who ignored them never made it to morning. The first night in North Point Station started like every horror movie ever warned me about. Only I wasn't watching it unfold on a screen, I was living it, and I didn't get to rewind. The wind had picked up again after Elliot left, rattling the windows and shaking the old metal siding like the ocean itself was trying to wake me. I told myself it was just the wilderness, the cold, the isolation, but deep down, I knew that wasn't. Or it was not yet. I had unpacked enough to make the small upstairs apartment feel like a home, or at least a temporary shelter. But no matter how many boxes I opened, the shadows in the station seemed to follow me. Every sound echoed too clearly. My boots on cracked tile, the dripping of water somewhere in the storage hall, a faint metallic groan from the tracks outside. I tried to laugh it off, swigging cheap whiskey from a bottle I'd brought in case I got nervous. But even that didn't stop the unease. Midnight approached faster than I expected. The clock above the ticket booth ticked forward relentlessly, the brass hands glinting in the dim lamplight. I glanced at Elliot's keys on the counter and thought about his warnings, no lights after midnight. Doors closed after the last whistle, never speak to the passengers who shouldn't exist. I chuckled nervously at the last one, but the joke felt hollow in my chest. Something about that phrasing. It wasn't superstition. It wasn't idle scatatics he had meant. I just didn't know what it was yet. Then I heard it. A faint, distant whistle that shouldn't exist. I froze, staring at the frosted windows, the hair on my arms standing on end. The station had no scheduled trains at this hour. The rails outside were unused, and yet the sound came closer, carrying through the frozen forest, like some spectral engine cutting through the silence. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe fatigue, maybe nerves. But then the vibration began, a low, rhythmic rumble through the floorboards. My stomach sank as the sound got louder, sharper, terrifyingly real. Presence. A train was coming and there was no engineer, no crew, no explanation. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking, and ran down the creaking stairs to the platform. Snow had piled high along the tracks, untouched and pristine until now. Then I saw it, headlights cutting through the blizzard, moving steadily toward the station. Silent, except for the groaning of metal on ice, the whisper of air through the rails. My rational mind screamed, there shouldn't have been a train here. I should have called someone. I ran upstairs, locked the doors, turned off all lights. My breath fogged in the icy air. I told myself I was safe, that I hadn't broken any rules yet, but something deep in me knew I already had. Then came the scratching. Soft at first, then louder, circling the windows. A sound like fingernails tracing the wood, searching for a way inside. My rational brain argued it was branches, snow, some natural explanation, but the voice in my chest told me otherwise. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to see. I grabbed my flashlight again and peered out a small window. The train had vanished. Snow was undisturbed again, as if nothing had arrived at all. My pulse raced. What I'd seen or thought I'd seen was gone. I checked the ledger Elliot had left in the office. I don't know why. Curiosity, obsession, guilt. I flipped through the yellowed pages, and my stomach turned to ice. Passenger names, dates, times all recorded meticulously. But something was wrong. Some names weren't familiar, weren't possible, and then I froze. A page labeled tonight, time-stamped moments after midnight, had a name I knew far too well my own. I didn't touch the ledger again after that. My hands shook too much. My mind reeled, trying to convince myself this was a mistake. Misprint, my subconscious trying to scare me. Anything but reality. Hours passed. The train never returned. The woman never spoke again. Elliot never came back. That night, I was left alone with the cold, the shadows, the ticking clock, and the gnawing certainty that something inside the station had noticed me and it wasn't finished up by morning. The snow had settled like nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the station itself was alive, watching, measuring the smallest infraction. I didn't know if the woman had been a ghost, a hallucination, or a warning. All I knew was that breaking a rule of an unknowingly, consequences I couldn't yet understand, and that was just the first night. Morning came slow in North Point Station, though calling it morning felt like a lie. The sky outside was the same flat gray as the night before, the snow stretching endlessly into the trees, untouched and silent. I had barely slept, the images from last night clawing at the edges of my mind. The train headlights, the whisper of the whistle, the woman who shouldn't have existed. I tried to convince myself it had all been a dream, a trick of isolation. But deep down I knew the truth was more terrifying. Elliot arrived just as the sun barely pierced the horizon. I hadn't expected him so early, and for a brief second I felt relief. But his expression was unreadable, flat as ice. No greeting, no small talk, just that same heavy look, like he was already mourning me. "You followed the rules?" he asked, voice quiet but sharp. I swallowed. I don't know. I didn't touch anything, honestly. His eyes narrowed, and he didn't respond. He didn't need to. I could see in his gaze that he already knew that my denial didn't matter. He led me to the office, the ledger still on the desk. I froze as he opened it, flipping to the newest entries. The handwriting was precise, careful, yet somehow wrong. Names I didn't recognize filled the page, times noted in exact minutes past midnight, and then my stomach dropped. There it was, my name, written clearly, time-stamped, 12:04 a.m. I backed away, hands trembling. This isn't possible. I didn't. You did, Elliot said, cutting me off. His tone wasn't angry, but it was heavy with disappointment. The manifest doesn't lie. I've watched many owners ignore the rules, and none have ever gotten away with it. I couldn't process it. My mind spun, refusing to accept the words on the page. My name, recorded as a passenger, meant what? Had I boarded the train? Was I gone and still here? I tried to speak, but the sound caught in my throat. My own voice felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't leave the station. I managed to choke out. Didn't leave. Elliot's eyes were sharp now, almost piercing. Then why is your name here? The room felt colder, though the furnace was running. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, bending with the movement of the flickering lamplight. I wanted to leave, to run anywhere away from the ledger, the station, Elliot, but every instinct told me I was trapped. I don't know. Remember, maybe someone wrote it as a joke, I said, desperation in my voice. Maybe the pages. I don't know. Maybe it's a mistake. Elliot shook his head. Mistakes like this don't happen. The station keeps track. You can't cheat it. You can't bargain with it. My chest tightened, a cold dread spreading through me. Something unseen pressed against the walls. Something that had been awake all night, measuring, waiting. And the woman, she had been real. I was sure of it now. But was she a warning or a witness? I slammed my hands on the desk. I didn't do anything wrong. I followed the rules. I didn't touch the doors. I didn't talk to anyone. Elliot leaned closer, voice low. You did. Whether you think you did or not doesn't matter. The station decides, not you. Panic clawed at my mind. I could feel it creeping into every corner of reason, twisting logic until nothing made sense. The clock above the ticket counter ticked steadily toward midnight, and I realized I had been watching it obsessively all day without even noticing. For more hours, and the rules would reset or worse escalate. You can fix this, right? My voice shook. You can take my name off the manifest. Elliot shook his head slowly. You can't erase what's been recorded. You can only survive it if you're clever or lucky. I laughed nervously, a hollow sound that echoed in the office. Lucky, clever, words that had no meaning anymore. I glanced at the window. Snow was still falling softly, but the tracks outside seemed different. There was a sheen on the metal that hadn't been there before. Like the rails were wet, alive, waiting. Then I saw movement. A shadow flickered across the platform. Not human, not entirely, but with form. My breath hitched, chest tightening, and I realized the woman had returned, watching, patient, unblinking. I stumbled back from the desk, almost tipping the ledger to the floor. My eyes darted around, searching for something solid, something real, and found nothing. The room felt too large, the shadows too deep, the station itself too aware. I wanted to scream, to run, to tear the building apart, but I knew it would do nothing. You have to leave, Elliot said suddenly, snapping me out of the spiral, before it comes again. The rules, they aren't suggestions. Tonight, it will know you've been careless. Tonight, it will decide. I wanted to argue, to plead, but no words came. I could barely breathe. The weight of last night, the ledger, the train, the woman, everything pressed down on me, heavy, suffocating. I realized something terrifying. Elliot might not be able to protect me. Maybe he had already tried. Maybe he was only the messenger, doomed to warn owners too late. Every single time I picked up the ledger with trembling hands, glancing at my name once more, it felt like a verdict, stamped in ink and snow. And I knew, deep down, that nothing, no explanations, no rationalizations, no denials would change what had already been recorded. The train would come again tonight, and when it did, I didn't know if I would step aboard willingly, or if the station itself would make the decision for me. All I knew was that North Point Station had claimed my name, and it would not let go.